Hey, gang, welcome to another episode of the Power of Nine podcast. I am your host, Aaron Eggert. The life journey of today's guest is something that you have to hear to believe. I'm just going to leave it at that. So let's not dilly-dally around here anymore and get started with my guest today, Dan Neitz. Dan, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Good to hear you as well. So we have a lot more listeners than we do video watchers. So don't be discouraged if you think that our video skips or anything like that. It's all about the audio.
There you go. All right.
Yeah. So, well, I'm super excited to have you on. You and I have become buddies over the last few months. I can't believe our paths didn't cross with all the fun stuff that you do and the stuff that I do and stuff like that. And then a mutual friend, Josh Feedy from Sales Reach, plug for him, he connected us and like we hit it off right off the get-go.
Yeah, I got to give him credit. That was a heck of a intuitive thought, and I totally agree with you about. It seems weird now that we've never connected in the past.
Yeah, now I talk to you like every other week, and we're texting, and I'm gonna send you a YouTube video from our crazy barn party that we went to, and all this stuff. So now, yeah, it's and now you're a Coalition 9 facilitator. The whole show, like we're all in.
Yep, I love it.
Yeah. I love it. All right. So you, I like to always start out a little bit about where you're from and your upbringing and things like that. So you are from here in the Twin Cities, right?
Yes. Born and spent my early years on the east side in Woodbury.
Yeah. And what was Woodbury like then compared to Woodbury now?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, we just spent all day in the fields, right? There was just only a couple of buildings out there. I remember when we got our first McDonald's, like when getting McDonald's was a big thing. And just to see the development that's now there is just pretty wild. It's like, as far as the eye can see, there's just house after house after house. But we had a lot of fun playing in the fields. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty typical childhood. And any siblings?
One brother, yeah, a little bit younger, 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years. Did you guys get in fights a lot when you were kids?
We
beat each other up?
We fought pretty hard. And then I think it's interesting because it was like just one day, and we do joke about this. Like one day we went from like, you're the worst person ever to like, you're the best person ever. It was a switch flipped and it was just the love or whatever opened up, and we've been, buddies ever since. So yeah.
How old were you when you figured that out? When that switch flipped?
Oh man, not early enough. It was sometime in the latter part of high school, I think, where I began to see him differently. But it wasn't before then. It's maybe like my junior year, I'm guessing.
Yeah, nice. What was your deal in high school? What was your did you play sports or anything like that?
Oh man, we've gone quite personal here quickly. So I was not a great athlete.
Yeah.
And I wasn't necessarily overly social either. And I remember my parents kind of issued an edict, and they said, hey, you got to get involved in something. In fact, we're going to make you got to take a sport. You got to go pick one. And I was frustrated by, being forced to do that. So I figured I'd show them, and I decided to join wrestling. And
I'm gonna get me a case of cauliflower here.
That's right. So it was really awkward too, because even as a freshman, I was really tall. I remember there was nobody at 105 pounds, right? And I was probably 5'10" and 105 pounds. So I wrestled varsity my freshman year, and I was just mangled, destroyed. Like my goal each week was like, can I go a minute before they pin me? And then the next week is, can I go 90 seconds before they pin me? And then, then I tried to last like an entire match before they, busted me in half. It's very humbling, but it was, in retrospect, I certainly learned resilience.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, I'm guessing you didn't take that wrestling career to college, but where did you end up going to school then after high school?
Yeah, a little bit lacking direction. I just ended up going to the University of St. Thomas. It was the College of St. Thomas initially. So that was in the Twin Cities here, it's a good school. I just hadn't really thought much about that part of my life. And I ended up in a dorm there called Ireland Hall, which was pretty fun. It was a heck of a first year. And it inspired me to actually take the social life that I had cultivated there to the next level. So I was like, no, wait a minute, I got to go to Madison. That's where it really gets done, is at Madison. So I transferred to Madison after my first year at St. Thomas.
Yeah. And then when you went to so I think, I swear everybody that we've had on this, except for maybe Laura King, but I think everybody goes to Madison for engineering or some type of thing like that. Is that what you went to school for?
I did. Yeah. I was just kind of drifting a little bit at St. Thomas, but I had an internship or a job at Ecolab, and I was working in their R&D, research wing and building stuff, and I started to hang out with these mechanical engineers and saw what they were doing. And that was what actually brought me to Madison. I was like, I want to go do that. I want to go be a mechanical engineer. So, yeah.
So did you, did you use that for anything in your first job out of school, or how did you handle after your undergrad?
I think the answer is yes. And as I got near the end of my engineering degree, all the different deans that I had been sort of making relationship with, you learn sort of in the second half of your college career, you got to be involved. So I was doing a lot of different activities, started meeting different leaders. They're like, have you thought about like a technical sales role? I understood it initially as a compliment. I don't know that it was that on the back end. I think they're trying to be kind. Maybe you really don't know how to engineer that well, but you seem social. So why don't you? So I actually went right from undergrad into a technical sales role for a company called Train, and sold some really big stuff, big systems, building automation, where you had to have the degree, but you weren't obviously behaving like a regular engineer would.
So talk about that a little bit. So it was your first gig right out of school, sales. And then what was your experience into what region were you in, and B, right out of school? And then what was kind of the onboarding of sales right out of college like for you?
I had kind of an interesting on-ramp. So I was, Train at the time was headquartered in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And in the HVAC industry, they were a little bit famous for the care with which they cultivated they had two different cohorts they'd hire for each year. Mm-hmm. And then they would bring these large cohorts, like 50 to 100 people from not only the US, but the world, to La Crosse for 6 months. And we would basically sit in the basement in stadium seating for 6 months, all day, every day, learning sales, programs, learning about product set, touring factories. So it was very immersive. And then in that process, they'd sort of, figure out your nature and things like that, and then put you in a sales office somewhere in the nation. So I got assigned to Milwaukee right out of that. So from Madison, short break, I don't even think I had a month. And then I was in this training program, and then I got assigned to Milwaukee.
Was there anything in that training that you were like, kind of an aha moment related to sales that you're like, okay, I dig this?
That's, there was one fairly affirming moment. They brought in some big speaker, and the speaker, was giving some lesson, and they said, hey, there's something I want to tell you about at the end. Like, we're going to give this book away, some, really fancy book, like Good to Great, that genre of book.
Yeah.
At the end of the talk, and he gave the talk, and he never said anything about the book. And so I didn't wait very long. I said, hey, what about that book? I raised my hand. And this was sort of a trick question. They wanted to say who would ask for the order. And so I got some applause for that. And I obviously, I still remember that moment.
Yeah.
And it was informative, right? You got to ask for what you want in any moment, whether that's sales or just life itself. So.
And you spent a good amount of time at Train. I know you jumped from there and went to EMC for a little bit, but then you got back together with Train, and you ended up in the Bay Area. Why did you end up in the Bay Area for quite a while?
Yeah, that's one of the most interesting parts of my journey, I feel like. So my wife is Japanese American, and we met at the Train company, and I didn't even know. I don't know how long it was until we were dating about the internment camps, right, that happened in our nation's history. And so when fast forward, I'm starting to think about, marrying, and we were talking about that, and their family was all in the camp. Her parents or grandparents, they were all in the camps. They lived on the West Coast prior. Then they were imprisoned. And then one of the sort of the conditions of release is they pretty much placed Japanese Americans, they scattered them so that they couldn't congregate, or have sort of en masse gatherings. And they didn't want them back on the West Coast. So my wife grew up in Chicago as a result of that. But when it came time to get married, which I've been at Train for about 10 years, was like, hey, now her family is going to move back to the West Coast to kind of repatriate where they were from. And I basically jumped in line with that vision, which, having visited San Francisco a number of times, that was not a hard sell.
Yeah.
Pretty fun.
No kidding. And how long did you spend in the Bay Area?
Round numbers, like 12 years, maybe.
Yeah. And while you were out there, you got a bug. I don't know. You kind of talked about this when we were doing our Coalition 9 session, like the get to know yous and stuff. And so you decided to go get your master's in psychology.
Yes, I did.
So what precipitated that? So unpack that a little bit for me, that whole process and thought process and process.
Yeah, it was interesting. I jumped at the sales role initially due to the promise of income and sort of the superficial, hey, you're extroverted. Salespeople, tend to be extroverted. This could probably work. And I have to be honest, the income came really fast. I don't want to give myself too much credit for that. I think I'm was decent at the role, but I also think, there's a little bit of, lucky patch or lucky territory at the time. So I ramped up pretty quick. But I have to be honest, I was always trying to do something in that role that the role and the company were like, we don't need that. Like, I was always trying to care for my clients, in ways that really were not centered on HVAC. I think I was always trying to serve more deeply than they were interested in. And then as a young person, I didn't quite understand that. That was fairly chafing, bothered me a lot. So I kind of was like, I really love the money here, but I don't feel much sense of purpose. So then I began this journey of, seeking purpose. So I would go, into the school districts because I love teaching, I love education. So I started tutoring and mentoring, big brothers, big sisters. And I began to understand myself as somebody that was always doing purpose outside of work and then sort of tolerating what was happening, within work. And then when we moved to the West Coast, I thought, all right, I'm done with this, had done quite well in the sales career. I'll just try something new. That's where the EMC came in for a short bit. We can talk about that later. But the reason I came back to Train is after, that short stint at EMC, it was just really clear that I love developing others. I was spending a ton of time outside of the office doing it. I was actually spending a ton of time inside the office. I was, onboarding all sorts of salespeople and admins when they come on, and I just loved doing it. And so I was like, I think maybe I'm really in life to be a therapist was kind of the thinking. So Train actually looked like coming back looked good because I already know how to do this. And I go to school at night and I can intern all those things. I can do both without killing myself. And so that's largely what brought me back to Train.
How long did you spend on your psychology degree journey?
Yeah, so that was about 4 years at night, and then thousands, about 2,500 hours, at night again in interning after that, until I got to the point where I was like, yeah, I'm not really a therapist.
So you spent all that time to figure out this therapist part isn't really my jam, but I'm going to use this in some capacity here in the future. I know I am.
Yeah, it was really kind of wild. I love the growth, that occurred as a result of becoming a therapist. Like the school that I went to really puts you through the paces, to figure out who you are, and how much of your own wounding that you may or may not be bringing to the situation with your clients. So they really tried to make, you grounded and whole as part of your learning. I liked all that. I loved the depth. I'll even say the intimacy, just in the sense that we're talking about stuff that really mattered, really relevant. I loved all that. But I also then realized, gosh, as a sales guy, I've been wired to be at the factory one day, and then doing a lunch and learn the next day, and then sales calls and writing orders. And I was like, I can't just sit in the same room, all day, every day in this same chair, which is what the interning experience revealed to me. So I was like, whew. And I think this was really a big piece of my journey because, I mean, I can't tell you the fanfare, if you will, the send off that I got when everybody in my life was like, oh, you're getting your master's in therapy. Like, it made perfect sense to everybody. And there was, it's not like people clap, whatever. They're just like, oh, yes, that is you. Nicely done. It's so good to see somebody on their path. And then when I set it down, everybody's like, what? It was like this record scratch. Like, what are you doing? You were set. I don't understand what you're doing here. And so that took some inner strength to really, just keep trusting the sense I had. So like, okay, I'm not going to forget what I did here, but I just need to learn how to apply it in different settings.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So you alluded to that pause there at Train, and you jumped ship for a little bit and went over to EMC for a year. Why?
Well, we were moving to California, and we knew, quite a bit about the Bay Area already, having visited so many times. And it's Silicon Valley, which, by the way, when I first showed up, I was calling it Silicon Valley. I got corrected so many times for that.
Oh yeah.
So Silicon Valley, and I was like, hey, this is tech, man, and what the heck, let's went in Rome. So I decided to try tech. And I'll just say, EMC is a good company. They're now owned by Dell. It's kind of funny. They owned Dell at the time I was there, so I don't know how that works. But it was, no offense to them, but it was not unlike the Glenn Ross, for those who've seen that movie. I mean, it was just this brutal, stand you up against the wall. You're forecasting, after hours, 2-3 nights a week. And I just was like, wait a minute, I don't need this money. I mean, I can't retire yet. So I just, like, within weeks, I was like, all right, looks like I'm just gonna have to make quota and then be done with this place because life is way too short. And then that's where the therapist thing started to come in, at the tail end of EMC. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do that. And then, Train calls. I'm like, yeah, I'll go work there. That's easy. And then I can get my master's.
Did you have a sales leader that was like the Alec Baldwin character? Remember him yelling and throwing coffee, and coffee is for closers and all that other stuff? Did you have anybody like that was at that company?
No, it was more, the result was the same. They tried to make it, they wanted to, I think for their own sake, come across as not being that way. So they were polite in a certain sense, but my life didn't matter. My schedule didn't matter.
Right.
It was all about the deals and the quarter and the closing. And it was really not fun. It was, but no, nobody threw stuff. All
right, good. That's how it should be. All right, we're gonna jump right into it here. Talk to us about this date of May 11th, 2015, which basically kicked off the real part of what you're put on this earth to do.
Yeah, that was a big day. So I love cycling on the West Coast. Raced for a while. It was never amazing, but I still hung out with racers, so I stayed in really good shape and had a tradition of going down the coast, with my buddies on our bikes. And in May of 2015, I was getting ready for that. I was doing a lot of training, and I got a saddle sore, which is like a kind of a zit in your crotch just from rubbing. Mm-hmm. And it ended up being, I guess, some bacteria got in through that, and so I ended up having a fever the week of this ride, and went to see the doctor. He's like, "Oh, you got the flu," and I'm like, "Huh, okay." They sent me home, and it was pretty bad. And really, what was going on was I had sepsis, but it was misdiagnosed, and so I crawled back to the ER basically the next day after a horrific 18 hours. Like, I just almost indescribable. And then it got to the ER, but then they lost me there. They did get me back, obviously. And that was just this unbelievable catalyst. I mean, there was a bunch of surgeries that week, coming back from that near death. And then there was about 8 weeks out of work. And I didn't need more than a week, if you will, out of that 8 weeks to know that I was going to be turning a page here. I just didn't know what the next chapter was going to look like.
Yeah.
So yeah, huge pivot.
Yeah, you say it. So this is I think maybe the third time I've heard you say this story. You kind of say that a little bit nonchalantly because I think you've told the story, but so I want to emphasize that like you died on the table, man. Like,
Yeah.
and so I want to make sure our listeners understand like the gravity that's involved in that. So I want to talk about that a little bit. Um, because I got to believe there's not very many people listening to this that have either died on the table or have come out of that. So what is that experience of you coming out of that like? Do you remember that at all?
There's some really, there's some very powerful parts of it. I did tell you that it hurt so much. I mean, so like sepsis is where you have an infection in your blood, right? So it basically puts it everywhere in your body. And so the way I ended up experiencing it was just like, it was this relentless pain that was in every part of my body. So when I was in the experience, it was almost impossible to have like another thought. So it was definitely, I was not like contemplating dying. There wasn't even room to think about that in that particular moment. And then all the other stuff happened so fast. Where I really began to see it was, I think the day after I got out of the ICU, my neighbor came to visit me and we were sitting in the hospital bed. I remember I still had this tube that they had stuck a tube in my heart through my neck. While that part I was awake for, that was interesting. But I had like this tube in my heart. I had 2 IVs. I had a tube in my gallbladder because that thing failed as part of this. And then I had a catheter. So I couldn't move in my bed. And my neighbor was sitting at the end of the bed and he was chatting with me and there was a knock on this door. And this woman sticks her head in and she says, "Hey, do you remember me?" And I totally remember. She was the woman that admitted me at the ER. I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Can I come in?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So she comes in, she pulls up a chair and she basically just starts talking to my neighbor. It was very surreal. So I'm sitting on the bed and they're at the end of the bed talking. And she just starts emoting to my neighbor. She's like, "You have no idea what this man has been through and what we did." And like, so she just started telling the story of this ER thing. And I'm sort of just kind of like watching it almost like on TV. Like she's describing what happened, how scared she and all the staff were, everything they did. And I later learned that she had been in the ER 20 years. And so like, so I'm still like on all these different meds where I'm not like from a consciousness perspective, like I'm not all there, even though I'm awake and I can chat with you. But there was this like this thawing, if you will, that was happening in my brain. Like, oh my God, this thing was, I mean, obviously it hurt. I sensed all that. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
So that was actually one of the pieces where I really began to understand what I had been through. I still remember that.
How long did it take you to recover from that day?
I think in terms of just the wounds, the cuts,
physically,
the surgeries, physically.
Yeah, physically. Yeah.
That was about the 8-week mark. But I'll say that, there's an element of like getting your kind of your energy and understanding your body the way you know before then. Like you can look like you're fixed. And then I think it was at least another year past that where I thought, okay, now I'm the guy that I remember myself as.
Yeah. And you still cycle to this day, right?
I do. Yeah, I cycled when I moved to Minnesota. I cycled for a little bit, but then I was a little spoiled by how cool Highway 1 and the Golden Gate Bridge was riding on the West Coast. So I decided to shift to running here for a while, for a few years, just to kind of explore different goals there. And then last year, I transitioned back to cycling, and so I'm doing that again.
Yeah. So you are the founder of COR, and I believe you say COR is Latin for heart.
Yep.
And so talk about what COR does. Talk about, I got to believe that this is all culminating out of, your near-death experience, but then also your psychological journey or psychology journey, and just everything all kind of coming together where you were just like, listen, I need to get this party started.
Yeah, I've tended to identify as one of those people, like they wear their heart on their sleeve, right? I feel like I do have a big heart. So when I began to think about, my business and what I was trying to do, really what we're doing or what I'm doing at COR is just everywhere I go, I'm just, if it's speaking or facilitating or coaching, I'm just trying to create environments that really foster self-exploration. because I think that's at the heart of what we really need to be doing for most of the concerns that we have. Like, great leaders, right? If they want to get better, they need to see others differently. And to see others differently, you got to see yourself differently, right? Or if you're sick of conflict, or you want to do conflict differently, you got to see others differently. And then again, to see them differently, you have to see yourself differently. So I just feel like I want to get to the heart of any particular moment. And I see that a little bit more technically, like it's the engineering me a little bit. I don't mean heart really from a kumbaya perspective as much as, there's a reason we're doing this podcast. There's a reason you started Coalition 9. There's a reason various companies exist. And when we're looking to serve, we want to make sure we're getting to the heart of that, or we're getting to the reason, we're connecting with that. So that's what that's about.
Yeah. So so you alluded to facilitating, speaking, and coaching. So talk about some of the services you offer and what you're doing now and how you're providing value to the people that you work with in the community.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I've got an interesting journey in the sense that I'm kind of smashing together, my engineering, my psychology, my sales experience. For whatever reason, it gives me a slightly different lens. And I also just enjoy creating. So there's a body of work that I've created, a lot of different lenses or metaphors that I use to help clients think differently about themselves and their teams and the people they lead. So yeah, I mean, it's in one way, it's kind of all the same thing, right? I felt it before I almost died, but I mean, nearly dying or having that near death was, just the nail in the coffin, in the sense that we're all in life for a reason, right? I mean, that's just like, there's a reason we're doing the podcast. There's a reason Coalition 9 exists. Like, as listeners are thinking about their life, we can track, there's a reason for everything. There's a reason you're wearing what you're wearing today. The hair looks the way it does or it doesn't. And yet somehow we seem to always stop when it gets to us, that we're not here for a reason. So all of my work, one way or the other, is just trying to move people closer to their reason. Right?
Do you have a
team that we're, go ahead.
Do you have a good success story of someone you've worked with maybe in the last year that you had a profound impact on their way of thinking or a team's way of thinking?
Yeah, it's always a beautiful thing to really see. The greatest joy for me is at the individual level, but I mean, I love sort of the jazz nature of working with teams. Like, it's very dynamic, it's in the moment. Mm-hmm. But yeah, really seeing people accept their truth and start to live more consciously from that place, like live it at work, live it at home, and have more facility in that. And that happens all the time, with coaching clients, like, oh my gosh, like, I really am about whatever this values or these things are. And one of the things I think is so fun about learning to understand ourselves better is that when we do, we have a lot more freedom. And the example I give is, like, imagine you meet somebody that just loves giving hugs. They run around, they're just giving hugs all the time. It's just their thing. They love it. Yeah. And then COVID comes along. And then they're like depressed, right? Like, they can't hug anymore. But if you use, one of the images I use, like, just let's treat that person as an iceberg for just a moment. And we say, okay, that hug is the thing they're doing above the surface. What's the value below the surface that's driving that behavior? And then let's just say it's kindness. If you can be a leader that helps them see that the kindness, for example, is driving that hug, it opens up all kinds of potential, right? So COVID comes along. All right, so I can't hug right now, but I know, this is about, like, I know I'm in life, to do this thing. I can do it a million different ways. So that's what regularly happens, whether it's in my classes or my coaching experiences. We're really taking people down below the surface, tracking what's really driving them. And then when you see that, when they see that, like, then all of a sudden it opens up all kinds of possibility. I think one of the big things that I used to struggle with, and I think is part of our modern life, is we get so attached to the vehicles or the ways with which we express our values that we sort of lose sight of the values themselves. Like our jobs, our relationships, those are all vehicles for expressing the reason we're in life. But it's really easy to over-identify, say, oh, I am my job, or I am this role, or I am a lawyer, or I am an accountant. And I'm like, you're not an accountant. You're not a lawyer. I mean, you have that role, but that's just one way you express the reason you're in life. And it's in sort of that shift of thinking that some big stuff starts to open up.
And I think too, people generally are afraid. I'm going to use the word afraid. I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm going to use it. Afraid of being vulnerable, right? And I think not only just being vulnerable to another human being, but vulnerable to themselves, right? And just opening up and digging deep into whatever they're truly feeling or thinking. And so a lot of people, they just can't do that on their own, and they need, it's a journey. And I think having a guy like you with some life experience that is beyond what 99% of Americans are probably dealing with can help guide that inform that vulnerability.
Yeah, it's hard to put value on certain places within ourselves, right? I mean, it's hard for us to do it to ourselves, and then it's actually, think about it, it's doubly hard for somebody that's not us to do it. So it feels, again, like you say, really vulnerable for us to share some of these deeper things about ourselves, because we don't know how the world's going to regard it. But life ultimately is about serving others. I mean, it's like I knew that, and yet the near death, really locked that piece in. And it's just a really powerful way to serve, oftentimes by sharing or witnessing about your own processes. Like, our vulnerability really can be a great way of serving others, helping normalize, other experiences that they've had. So, yeah.
And as if you didn't have enough of a reason to put the walk where the talk is, you've had a near-death experience. You've devoted your life to serving others. So why the hell wouldn't you just go ahead and donate a kidney? And so you told me that the other day when we were talking, and you told me that when I first met you, but 2 months, 3 months ago, I barely remember last week, much less 3 months ago. So I'm like, oh my gosh, that's right. So you made the conscious decision, which truly is putting the talk or the walk where the talk is. And you gave a kidney to, was it a friend or a cousin?
Who was it? It was a college buddy, guy from Madison.
College buddy, right? So that's, which is basically like a family member if it's a college buddy, right? You've probably seen a lot of crazy stuff. So that to me was like the cherry on top of the Dan Neitz Journey Sunday, this kidney donation. When did you do that, and how did that come about?
Well, so I was going to give him my kidney back in 2005. So we had planned to do it. I had been flown out from the West Coast. He lives in the Midwest, and they did all the testing. We were a match. We were scheduling surgery, and then a cadaver kidney showed up. So from a dead person, and he took that, and it was a smart decision, because kidneys don't last forever. Not even the living kidney that I've given him. The rough life that he can expect is about 25 years from my kidney, and it's about 10 from a cadaver kidney. So he was 35 at the time, and he's like, I gotta take this kidney. I'm like, yeah, take it. But then basically I went on deck, right? Just waiting. And so he called, in the midst of COVID last year, and he's like, hey man, the numbers have shifted. He didn't say this, but it's like, I'm back in the market.
Right. I gotta believe that it took him some like mental fortitude to build up the guts to give you a call and say, hey, what do you still got that organ laying around?
Yeah, I did. And it's funny. Mine are really juicy. Like, they did the testing, and I was paying more attention to the data this time, and I'm going to be 50 here in a couple of weeks. And I have unbelievable kidneys. The stats are whatever on them. So it's pretty funny to be able to give them one of those. But yeah. So we did that. And then being in COVID, that was surreal, because, when I was going to give it in 2005, I was married, but didn't have kids. Now with children, and then also living in a pandemic, it didn't take more than a couple minutes, in all seriousness, but you're like, oh, is this a responsible choice as a father to do this during a pandemic, right? What additional risks does that put me at? But just the doctors are amazing. And there's so many people that have done this now. It's like, when you talk to these doctors, it's like they're just changing the oil on your car. They are so casual about this experience. So they had me reassured, and that the pandemic would be fine in that regard. And so I donated in November of last year, almost at the height of the cases. So wow. And how's he doing? He's doing good. Yep. It's a little trickier on the second donation, because the body's already been freaked out, and you're on heavy meds for all of your life. But yeah, no, he's pretty well set, and his creatinine, which is the blood marker for sort of figuring out whether your kidney's happy or sad is almost normal, right? I mean, it's pretty remarkable. So we're both excited for that. We hope it keeps going.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, your story is just so fascinating. And I said that at the beginning, like very, very rarely am I going to be able to get very rarely am I going to be able to have a person in my life that's experienced half the stuff that you have. And so, and you have such a great way of being very present and mindful. And I think all of these life experiences have guided you that way. One thing that you had mentioned to me that you are doing and you do for your daughters is you journal for them, and then you put together photo libraries for them. And, I think, boy, where could I go with this? I think so many parents, I'm not a parent, but I have parents, and do a poor job of like telling them like, this is what your life was like when you were a child, or this is what life was like for me when I was a child, or just sharing that experience together and being able to push that forward. And you're doing that so consciously. And I think that's one thing I'd love to know, like, what's your thought process, how you approach that, and what are you looking at for what that result would be like in the future for these girls?
Yeah, so this is an interesting thing. It brings us back to the near death. There was two things that I saw during that experience. I shouldn't say during, because I've already declared it was pretty painful, but there was a realization that I had in terms of the actual experience in that moment where I saw two big things. And it wasn't that my life flashed before my eyes, but I had one really positive thing and one really negative thing. And what I saw for myself was, if I had died that day, I didn't actually have any regrets in terms of how I had parented. Because as a sales guy, I've always controlled my own schedule. And to that point in my girls' lives, I had been around a ton, like working out of the house. I was always, there was nothing that I didn't get to do with them. And at that point, I'd already started journaling, right? To what you're asking about, so I had written probably back then already a few hundred pages for each girl. And I was just like, wow. So if I had gone, obviously it would have been really, just speculating, like, the soul drops the body. And I'm like probably wailing in that sense, but I'm also okay that when they see this journal and they think about how dad has been with them, they're going to know that they're loved. They're going to see how, much I cared for them, how much I regard them, how much I saw in them. Like, that journal was sort of this legacy for them. But the really humbling part was, other than that, I was just like, I have nothing to say for my life. That's just how I experienced it. Like, that part was good, locked in. Everything else, I was just like, oh my God, I haven't even started yet on the thing that I'm in life to do it. I mean, like, I got over it initially, but like, that was like, talk about a gut punch. I just was
right.
Holy. So that obviously has led us to where we're at today. And I've continued that journaling since then. And I do some pretty elaborate, we'll call it photo books, that really try and embody. I've actually grown or evolved in doing this. Because at some point in there, I did observe, I'm like, wait a minute, I can't be telling them what their journey is. I got to say, look, this is just how dad is taking in your experience. And I'm just giving, and I'm pretty thoughtful about how I regard, them and the journaling and everything. I'm just trying to give them a sense of their journey, some of the things that I noticed, so that they can connect the dots more quickly when they're older. But I want to always be careful that dad's not imposing, his experience on them. So it's a really fun project, and I'm very proud of it, for sure.
Yeah, you should be. I got goosebumps when you told me that the other day. So I love it, and very, very present of you. And I think those girls are lucky to have a dad like you.
Oh, thanks, man.
Okay. Boy, that was, I think we talked for about a half an hour, 35 minutes or something. And I purposely kind of hammered through it because I want to make sure that we're getting everything out, but I could talk to you about that stuff for 2 hours. If I'm sure other people would want to hear about your story. So we're going to talk about how people can find you right after we do the 9 questions. Okay. And so we're going to get into that, but I have a feeling that a lot of people are going to want to meet you. So those people that do, I can make a connection. Anyway, hard transition. There's
Okay.
either a soft transition when I do this or there's a hard one. After hearing all that, I'm making a hard transition. So,
All right.
9 questions. Can you confirm to me that we have not discussed what these 9 questions are prior to today or prior to right now?
We've not, though I do want to disclose that I was tempted to see if Mike Lewis, one of our Coalition 9 members, could use his AI to forecast or predict what might happen here, but I did not do that.
Right. Right. Well, if you listen to the show, which you said you listened to them all, which is great. You've heard some of these before. So if you've been using your engineering brain and pocketing all this stuff away into your mental hard drive, then I'm sure you'll be able to pull some of this out. So I'm going to dig right in. Question 1, what are 3 words that describe you?
Authentic. I've thought about this one before. I think, I feel good about authentic. Service, definitely growing into that. And I feel like exploring or exploration or something like that. I just love exploring the moment. So there's 3. Yeah.
Good. I like those. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
What is one guilty pleasure that you like to indulge in?
Oh my goodness. My girls were here. They would answer this for you and they would say Gardenscapes. So Gardenscapes is this little game on the iPhone that you play, this little app, and it steals way too much of my life. I get points so that they can spend them, which I love, but it's ridiculous. Very good pleasure.
I love it. That's great. I've never heard of that. Is that on the iPhone?
Yeah. I mean, if we got some viewers here, I'll pull up the can't really see it, but it's a little game on the iPhone there.
All right. So people can look up Gardenscapes on the App Store. All right. What is one quality in a person that impresses you?
Ooh. Well, Aaron, I am going to turn it back on you. When I see people who are so able to thoughtfully participate in the moment, like if we use the example of that scrappy marketing strategy where you were hosting, I witnessed, it was great content, but I witnessed how you were tracking the process of all the speakers. You were watching the audience. I just think it's amazing and gorgeous when people can be present to so many different facets of the moment and be so mindful about their serving. And that, that's an example that I've seen and I've been very impressed by.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
That means a lot, especially coming from you. What is one thing that you own that you wish you didn't?
Just one, huh? There's so much stuff. Gosh, when we lived in San Francisco, our house was so small, and there was nobody. They never built closets in the houses back in the day. There. Then we moved into this Minnesota house, right? Because there's land everywhere here, and we're just like, this is crazy. And I thought I'd have all this space, and now this thing is filling up. So there's like, this is like a million things I wish I didn't own. Gosh.
How about, you could qualify it with so much space. You wish you didn't have so much space.
Right. Maybe I don't, because like this yard or whatever, like there's no yards in San Francisco now. You got to cut grass, which I think you like cutting grass.
I do.
I think I probably, if I had to do it over again, we would go with a smaller house that was a little bit more close to what we had in San Francisco. But we were like, oh, Midwest, let's go big.
Yeah.
Which not super big, but anyway.
Yeah. All right. Do me a favor. Close your eyes.
Okay.
What is your favorite sound?
I love great laughter, but like specific laughter. There's certain voices. I love like my kids when they laugh.
Yeah.
Something about that. But there's certain people in life. Like I remember a guy from high school, his laugh was amazing. It just puts you in such a good place, Yeah. So that's what I'd say.
I think of people that you said that, and I thought of a couple of people that when I hear them laugh, it's special, right? Like it hits you right in the right spot. And I love that. That's awesome. Yeah. What is your favorite piece of clothing?
Oh my goodness.
That was a good laugh, by the way.
Yeah. I'm not into clothing. I mean, like, I don't know. I got a couple of cool t-shirts, whatever. I got a nice Coalition 9 t-shirt.
There you go.
Like this shirt right here. I mean, I don't know. I probably had it for 10 years.
Yeah.
I got like 5 shirts. I got 5 collared shirts. That's about it. I just rotate them.
Yeah.
They're all mostly blue or maybe purplish,
Very,
yeah.
that's very Midwestern male of you. Like that's a guy thing. I think like, God, I love this shirt. I'm going to buy 10 of these. When I used to wear dress shirts all the time, I used to get them from Banana Republic, and I used to just buy the same Banana Republic shirt, but just different patterns, whatever.
Yeah. I'm not quite Steve Jobs where it's like a black turtleneck, but I don't actually ever think too hard about it. That's
all right. Good. Gotcha.
Yeah.
How many books have you read this year so far? Would you guess?
Oh boy. Do you mean every single page of the book?
I mean, just books in general. No, I don't say, sometimes you get about 3/4 of the way through the book and you can consider it a win. So yeah, count that too.
Yeah.
Don't use your engineering brain a part of this. Like use your creative side and just give me a round number.
I don't know, 15 to 20, quite a bit.
And any one that sticks out that you are like, man, that was a damn good book.
Yeah, Cast has been a heck of a book.
What's that?
This is a book. It's about racism, and it's interesting exploring the Indian caste system and trying to find parallels in sort of how our nation lays out. Not to vilify or anything like that, but just for us to see differently how there are tiers to our experiences. Not everybody has the same experience in our community. So that was really powerful. Cast.
Mm-hmm.
It's a CASTE, like the Indian caste system, not like a cast on your leg or, like a movie. I got cast, but CASTE.
All right, great. Thank you. In one word, what is the current state of your email inbox?
Modest.
I love it. That's a great. We need to make your inbox less modest.
Well, I work hard. I don't know. That's an area of stress for me. So I don't let it stack up. And I had it all cleaned up over this long weekend. I got a lot of work done. And then I don't know, I filled up, yesterday and this morning pretty quick, but it's not
that's
bad.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, good. All right. Last one. When I say the word mentor, who do you think of and why?
Couple images flash, but the one that feels strongest is a guy that I've known for not quite 2 decades now. He lives out near the East Coast in Virginia. Just a great, he's even probably stronger than a mentor, more of a teacher. Just unbelievably talented, thoughtful, deep. I mean, this guy plays like all these instruments. He's like a multiple black belt in jiu-jitsu.
Jeez.
Just really, really talented. And then has this way of blending all of them, right? Like he can see connections across all. So anytime you're talking with this guy, you're just like, wow, I was not looking at it that way. And now I'm like, holy cow, it's amazing. So very expansive guy. Yeah.
Great. All right. That was it. You survived the 9 questions. Yep.
Yes.
Celebrate that.
Right.
So where can people find you, Dan? People need to know who you are and they need to connect with you. And so this is a big part of this podcast. And I got to make sure that people need to know where to find you. So shout it out. Yes.
Just two easy sources, right? LinkedIn's great. Been on that space a little bit more lately. So you can just look my profile up, Daniel Neitz, Neitz, kind of a unique last name. And then my website is www.workthecor, but no E, COR, which is Latin for heart. So workthecor.com. So hit me there. And if you reach out, I'll get back to you ASAP. So
yeah, people need to meet you. They need to make your inbox less modest.
There you go. All right.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Let's make it the next time I talk like busting at the seams or something, because you have such a fascinating story. I was so excited to meet you when I met you. And then I was more excited to be your buddy after I met you. So thank you so much for being on the show and being a part of Coalition 9 and a part of my life, man.
Likewise. Yeah, I love what you're growing. It's awesome.
All right. I'm glad to have you building it along with us, man. On behalf of Dan Neitz, this has been the Power of 9 podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Eggert, and I want to thank you for the privilege of your time. Cheers.